This is the king of late-night television, Johnny Carson. This is his former home in Malibu. He lived there for 30 years until he passed away in 2005. He bought it, get this, in 1984 for $9 million.
He ruled the night with charm, wit, and control. But away from the cameras, Johnny Carson's world was nothing like the one America adored. After his death, investigators entered his Malibu home and uncovered something deeply unsettling: secret rooms, coded letters, and private recordings that hinted at an obsession he took to the grave. Who was Johnny Carson? When the laughter stopped, the day America lost its favorite host. Back in the 1960s, long before streaming platforms and social media, there was Johnny Carson. He wasn't just your regular TV host. He was the man who could make an entire nation laugh and stay up late just to watch him. With his charming smile and effortless sense of humor, Johnny had a way of making people feel like they knew him personally. Every night, families gathered around their television sets, waiting for his jokes, his guests, and that familiar spark that made him special. Watching him became a nightly tradition in American homes, something people looked forward to after a long day. And night after night, Johnny proved exactly why he was called the King of Late Night. His show does not just entertain, it brings comfort. And with The Tonight Show, Johnny redefined what late-night entertainment could be. From the chaos of the 1960s to the upbeat vibe of the 1990s, his desk became the place where America came to unwind and laugh. He joked about presidents, teased movie stars, and made fun of the day's trending headlines, all while keeping that calm smile that everyone loved. Every comedian and talk show host who came after him, from David Letterman to Jimmy Fallon, followed in his footsteps. But here's the twist. The Johnny everyone saw on screen was very different from the man behind the scenes. Yes, you heard that right. Johnny was a man who valued privacy far more than fame. Of course, you might expect someone with such a bold and funny personality to love being everywhere. But that wasn't Johnny at all. He rarely appeared at public events, and interviews were almost unheard of. He often said he felt most comfortable when the spotlight wasn't on him. To those who only knew him from late-night TV shows, he seemed warm and open, but only a few people ever got close enough to know the real man behind the jokes. Unfortunately, after more than 30 years as host and years spent away from the public eye, Johnny Carson passed away in 2005 at the age of 79. When the news made headlines, millions of Americans mourned his death. For those who grew up watching him, it was like losing an old friend who had been there through every era, every laugh, and every late night. His final years reminded everyone just how much he had touched the lives of so many. But after Johnny passed away, all eyes silently turned to his Malibu estate. The mansion is located by the ocean, hidden behind tall trees and guarded gates. It was said to be peaceful, with open rooms that caught the afternoon light. This was where Johnny spent most of his later years, away from the spotlight. People close to him often said the house reflected who he truly was: private, quiet, and hard to read. When reports began to surface that Johnny's Malibu property was being carefully reviewed after his passing, people started getting curious. Fans and reporters wondered what might be found inside the home of a man who had spent so much of his life making others laugh, but rarely revealed much about himself. Johnny had always been careful to keep his private life separate from his work life, and that secrecy made people even more curious about what he might have left behind. Over time, rumors began to swirl about the house itself. People were intrigued by how simple and peaceful it seemed, more like a silent retreat than a typical celebrity estate. The contrast between Johnny's private life and his enormous fame only drew people in. Fans and critics couldn't stop wondering about the parts of his life that had always stayed hidden from the public eye. But before we dive into the mystery of what was found in his Malibu home, we need to rewind. To understand why Johnny Carson left such an impact on America, we have to go back to the very beginning. Long before the desk, the show, and the laughter, there was a boy from Iowa with a dream too big for his small town. Who was Johnny Carson? And how did he grow into the man everyone in America came to know and love? From small-town tricks to the king of late night. Before Johnny William Carson became the king of late-night show, he was just a boy from Corning, Iowa. Born in 1925 and raised in Norfolk, Nebraska. He wasn't the stubborn kid who was always looking for attention. Instead, he's a keen observer, the kind of kid who noticed everything and figured out what made people laugh. He fell in love with magic early, practicing simple card tricks and sleight of hand. He even gave himself a stage name, the Great Carsoni, performing at school events and local fairs, charming anyone who would watch. From those small performances, he learned an important lesson. Timing matters more than trying to look impressive, and a trick done slowly and carefully could impress people more than a quick, showy one ever could. After high school, Johnny joined the Navy during World War II. Life in the military was not easy, and from there he learned how to be very disciplined and focused, skills that would later help on stage. Even in the Navy, he kept performing, putting on small shows for fellow sailors, and enjoying making people laugh. When the war ended, he went to the University of Nebraska. There he studied speech and drama and learned about radio and broadcasting. He knew he loved performing, but he also wanted to understand how it all worked. So, after university, he decided to work in radio and TV stations in the 1950s. He took his time, learning the craft carefully from writing and announcing to hosting small shows. He figured out how to land a joke naturally, listen to guests, and hold an audience without forcing it. He quickly realized something important. Staying calm and confident drew people in more than trying too hard to grab attention. Those who worked with him later said he had this calm and silent confidence, as if he didn't need to prove anything, and that made people naturally pay attention to him. His major national breakthrough came when he hosted daytime and then nighttime shows that began putting him on the map. By the late 1950s, he was proving he could do more than magic tricks. His calm voice and charisma turned interviews into conversations that felt personal. Producers noticed his talent, but when The Tonight Show needed a new host in 1962, only a few expected him to take the spotlight. Yet Johnny stepped in and changed the way the world saw the late-night shows forever. From the first day Johnny sat behind that desk, he began shaping what late-night TV shows would become. The opening monologue was his stage, a place to test jokes and see what made people laugh. Every conversation with a guest, every moment on the show seemed effortless, but it was all carefully crafted. By his side were two people who became more than just colleagues. Ed McMahon, his longtime announcer, had a commanding, friendly voice and a laugh that matched Johnny's humor perfectly. Doc Severinsen, the bandleader, brought vibes and energy to the show with his music, and also set the pace for every segment. Together, they made a team that felt natural on screen, helping Johnny shine while making the show enjoyable and easy to follow for everyone. Also, Johnny had a rare gift for making every guest who appeared on his show shine. Sitting on his couch could define a career, and anyone looking for a big break in Hollywood dreamed of the opportunity to sit on his couch. His influence gave him tremendous power in the industry, but he never misused it. Being on his show meant more than publicity. It meant being noticed and remembered, and sometimes it could make or break a career. Over the years, his show became more than just a late-night program. It reflected what people were talking about and thinking at the time. He made funny jokes on politics, gave movie stars a chance to connect with viewers while promoting their films, and even showed a relatable side to presidents. Comedians studied his timing, and aspiring hosts watched how he could read a room effortlessly. He had an instinct for knowing when to step back and let the audience guide the energy. This careful control built trust, something rare in show business, and made viewers feel like they were part of something truly special every night. Just a few years into hosting, Johnny became a very successful television host. His success came with wealth, fame, and influence, but it also came with its own pressures. Every night, he had to deliver fresh jokes, book guests, and keep the show lively. He was a perfectionist who rewrote lines until they felt natural. Long nights, short rehearsals, and the constant need for consistency tested him, but he never let it show. This level of preparation made everything look effortless on screen, and it became part of the magic that kept audiences coming back night after night. However, everything shifted in 1992 when Johnny announced his retirement from hosting. After 30 years of being a successful host, he chose to step away from the spotlight. The news surprised and saddened fans who assumed he would host forever. He left at the peak of his career, deciding to exit on his own terms rather than fade away publicly. This choice shaped how people remembered him. He ended his career with the same careful control he brought to every show, setting a standard for late-night shows and becoming the benchmark for generations of hosts to come. When Johnny Carson retired, the change was felt across the country. Over 50 million people watched his final show, and as he walked off the stage for the last time, it felt like an era silently came to an end. He wasn't just a host, he had been a constant figure and the familiar voice guiding Americans through decades of laughter and life's ups and downs. However, despite a career that made him a household name and a cultural icon, Johnny Carson's life behind the scenes told a different story. Behind the laughter and cheers, he faced periods of loneliness and personal challenges. His multiple marriages showed that even fame couldn't protect him from the ups and downs of life. His colleagues often said he could make millions laugh, but he seemed to live with silent sadness that the public never saw. Despite all the success he achieved, his life reminds us that even the brightest star can have shadows lurking just out of sight. What was Johnny really like when the cameras stopped rolling and the audience went home? How did he spend the silent hours far from the spotlight? And behind all the laughter and late-night jokes, how did he handle love, heartbreak, and life away from the public eye? Behind the curtain, the man the world never knew. For years, Johnny Carson was the man who could make anyone laugh. And of course, many assumed that a man like him must have had a perfect life. But behind the fame and the jokes, there was a side of him most people never saw. Those who knew him closely often said that the man who left the stage every night was very different from the one who had just entertained millions. Even today, this reality still unsettles people, because behind his effortless humor was someone silently searching for a piece that always seemed just out of reach. Johnny was married 4 times, and each marriage told a piece of his personal story. His first marriage was to Jody Wolcott in 1948, long before anyone knew Johnny Carson's name. Together, they had 3 sons, Christopher, Corey, and Richard, who was often called Rick. But as Johnny's career began to take off, the growing distance between his family life and the demands of show business became impossible to ignore. His work demanded long hours, constant attention, and a life in the public eye that left little room for silent family moments. By 1963, just as he was stepping into the biggest chapter of his life with The Tonight Show, their marriage came to an end. However, that same year, Johnny married Joanne Copeland, a former model who would be at his side during the peak of his fame. For a while, they seemed like the picture-perfect Hollywood couple, the kind people envied and looked up to. But behind closed doors, things were different. Joanne later described life with Johnny as glamorous but also lonely. He was endlessly charming, yet emotionally distant. A man who could make millions laugh, but often struggled to connect with those closest to him. By 1972, their marriage ended, revealing that the private life of America's favorite late-night host was far more complicated than anyone had imagined. Despite 2 failed marriages, Johnny still believed in love, determined to find a partner who could finally stay by his side. That search led him to Joanna Holland, a model who became his 3rd wife. They married quietly in 1972, in a ceremony so private that even his staff didn't know for months. And for a while, it seemed like Johnny had finally found some balance in his life. But by the 1980s, cracks began to show, and their relationship unraveled. Their divorce, finalized in 1985, made headlines as one of the most expensive settlements in Hollywood at the time. Friends and colleagues said the experience left Johnny more guarded than ever. One might have thought that after so many ups and downs, Johnny would give up on marriage, but he didn't let it stop him. In 1987, he gave love one final chance with Alexis Maas. Unlike his previous marriages, theirs stayed out of the headlines. Alexis was private, graceful, and happy to remain behind the scenes. For the first time, Johnny seemed genuinely at ease. Friends said her silent presence and support gave him a sense of calm, allowing him to live his final years peacefully. They stayed together until his passing in 2005. Meanwhile, Johnny remained a man wrapped in mystery. After retiring in 1992, he rarely gave interviews and often turned down public appearances. He preferred the peace of his Malibu home, reachable only by a small circle of close friends. People who knew him described him as sharp, witty, and thoughtful, and at the same time very private. Even though millions adored him, he chose to watch from the sidelines, far from the spotlight that had once defined his life. Interestingly, those who worked closely with Johnny often said he had two very different sides, the one the world saw and the one he kept locked away. On stage, he was warm, quick, and completely captivating, holding the audience in his grasp with every word and gesture. Offstage, he retreated into himself, often distant and guarded. The constant pressure to always perform had made him treasure his private moments like gold. Ed McMahon, his partner on The Tonight Show, once revealed that after the cameras stopped rolling, Johnny would quietly slip away into his car, disappearing without a word. In those moments, away from the public eye, he found a kind of peace that the world never got to see. Also, as we all know, fame comes with a price. And for Johnny Carson, it went beyond long hours and constant public attention. Over time, he grew cautious, trusting only a few people. Those close to him said his humor often acted like a shield, keeping others at a safe distance. But behind the laughter was a deeply sensitive man who genuinely cared, even if he rarely let that side of himself show. However, life was not always kind to Johnny. In 1991, he faced a loss that stayed with him for the rest of his life. His son, Rick Carson, tragically passed away. Those close to him said he was never quite the same after that day. He became even more withdrawn, spending much of his time sailing or sitting by the ocean. The man who once made the world laugh seemed to find his own comfort only in the sound of the waves. As the years passed, Johnny retreated even further from public eyes. Sometimes he'd be spotted around Malibu, or stories would surface about silent acts of generosity to friends and charities. But for the most part, he stayed in the background, observing the world he once commanded. To many, it seemed as if he had disappeared into the very mystery that had always surrounded him. A man who shared everything on stage but kept almost all of himself hidden off it. And by the time Johnny passed away in 2005, he was more than a TV legend. He had become a symbol of a different era, a time when late-night shows felt personal and hosts seemed like friends. Fans remembered the laughter and the warmth he brought into their homes every night. But even as those memories lingered, questions about the man behind the persona began to surface. A few days after his death, all attention turned toward his private Malibu home. Most people can't help but be curious about the kind of life he led away from the media. For someone who had spent decades keeping the world at arm's length, people wondered what secrets were hidden behind those closed doors. What secrets had he tucked away? What personal treasures, mysteries, or hidden truths lie behind those doors, waiting to be discovered? What was found inside Johnny Carson's mansion? For years, many people wanted to know how Johnny was living after he stepped away from the spotlight. This curiosity fueled their desire to see what might be hidden behind the walls of his Malibu mansion after he passed away. The mansion is located on a cliff above the ocean, silent and peaceful. But inside the house wasn't as luxurious as expected of a celebrity home. Instead, it was simple, just like the man who once lived inside. When the team in charge of managing Johnny's home first stepped inside, The silence was almost striking. Everything was still. The books, the furniture, even his favorite coffee mug sat right where he had left it. As they began sorting through his things, it became clear how organized and deliberate Johnny had been about preserving the details of his life and career. As they continued going through the house, they discovered a locked cabinet in his study. Inside were hundreds of videotapes, some labeled, many not. They contain unseen moments from The Tonight Show, rehearsals, off-camera jokes, and quiet glimpses of the man behind the smile. On the tapes, Johnny laughed at his own mistakes, practiced his timing, or just sat in silence between takes. It was as if he had quietly preserved his own story, not for fame, but for himself. Hidden in corners of the house were parts of Johnny's life that few had ever seen. Boxes of old cue cards sat neatly, each filled with jokes and monologues that had once made America laugh. Decades of comedy were preserved in his own handwriting, every line carefully labeled. To those who worked with him, it showed how much he respected his craft. Every laugh, every pause, and every word was intentional. Behind that effortless charm was a man who treated humor like both an art and a science. However, the most surprising discovery, the one that still stuns people and changed the way they remember Johnny, was hidden among his personal papers. It was the record of his private foundation, something very few had ever known about. For years, he had silently given away large sums of money without ever seeking recognition. After his death, it was revealed that the John William Carson Foundation had received $156 million from his estate, making it one of the largest charitable gifts ever given by a celebrity. The foundation supported children's health, education, and the arts, causes that meant a great deal to him. While the world remembered Johnny as the man who made millions laugh, his final legacy revealed a generosity that few had ever expected. But the story of Johnny's mansion didn't stop with his foundation. As news of the discoveries spread, rumors began to swirl through Hollywood and online. Some reports claimed there were sealed rooms inside the estate, places no one had dared to open. Others speculate about lost recordings, entire episodes of The Tonight Show that had never aired. Also, according to reports, some personal letters written in his neat, simple handwriting were found. Some were said to be for close friends, others for family, and a few for former colleagues. The letters reportedly expressed gratitude, apologies, and silent reflections, or even confessions he never meant anyone to read. However, none of these claims and reports were confirmed, but they added to the mystery that always surrounded him. Before long, tabloids and social media were buzzing with speculation about what else might be hidden inside the mansion. Were there really journals, lost scripts, secret recordings? Most of these rumors disappeared as quickly as they appeared. However, what remained clear was that what was found inside wasn't what many expected. There were no shocking stories or hidden secrets, just signs of a man who had spent years making the world laugh, yet lived with discipline and deep thought. And as people looked closer at what he left behind, the tapes, the letters, the laughter, and his generosity, one thing became clear. Johnny Carson's final act was more than just entertainment. It was about leaving behind a legacy that proved a person can change the world and make an impact without ever needing the spotlight. But what lasting mark did Johnny Carson leave on the world? And how would people come to remember the full story of his legacy? Johnny Carson's enduring legacy. Unlike many stars who made comebacks or appeared in special shows after stepping away from fame, Johnny chose a different path. He stayed completely out of the public eye. The closest people to him said he valued his privacy more than anything. After years of hosting shows every night, the routine had taken its toll, and he longed for a life free from cameras, interviews, and the pressure of millions watching. He spent his last days enjoying the peace and serenity of his Malibu home. He spent days sailing, relaxing, and enjoying simple routines, far from the chaos of show business. He had already reshaped late-night TV, and there was nothing left to prove. His final years showed a side of Johnny most people never saw. content, satisfied, and finally at peace with the life he had built. Even years after his passing, Johnny Carson's influence on late-night TV shows is undeniable. Sitting behind a simple desk, delivering jokes with perfect timing, he didn't just make people laugh. He changed the way talk shows were done. The style he created, the pauses, the charm, and the way he connected with audiences became a blueprint for generations of hosts. Today, when people look back at his hosting days, they often say Johnny didn't just host a show, he set the standard. His interviews, whether with big celebrities or regular guests, felt personal, like a friend was talking to you in your living room. He had a way of making every guest comfortable while keeping the audience hooked. His hosting style became the gold standard for talk show hosts that followed. Beyond the laughs, Johnny Carson's career also showed the importance of professionalism and consistency. Night after night, he arrived prepared, calm and focused, setting a standard for everyone who followed. He treated his guests with respect and made each one feel at ease, whether they were movie stars, musicians, or everyday people. Beyond his influence on other hosts, Johnny's legacy lives in the way audiences remember him. People didn't just tune in for jokes or celebrity interviews. They felt like they were visiting a friend's living room every night, sharing a laugh and a moment of connection. This feeling of intimacy is something few hosts have managed to recreate, and it is part of why Johnny Carson is still remembered so fondly. Johnny's achievements were recognized many times during his career. He won 6 Emmy Awards for his work on The Tonight Show, along with a special Lifetime Achievement Emmy. In addition, he was honored with a Peabody Award for excellence in broadcasting and received numerous other awards celebrating his contributions to television and comedy. These accolades reflected not just his talent, but the respect he earned from peers and the industry. Also, Johnny's influence can be seen in the hosts who followed in his footsteps. Legends like Jay Leno, David Letterman, and Jimmy Fallon often cited him as a major inspiration. They studied his timing, his ability to handle interviews, and the way he made audiences feel at home. Johnny didn't just entertain, he taught a generation how to connect with people through the screen. The John William Carson Foundation continues to support arts, education, and health, carrying forward a mission of generosity that reflects his values. Historians, comedians, and fans mark his birthdays and career milestones, making sure the man who shaped late-night television is never forgotten. Even today, in the age of streaming and social media, his contributions are studied, shared, and celebrated, showing that his influence stretches far beyond the decades he spent on air. Johnny Carson's legacy is a lesson in grace, professionalism, and the silent power of consistency. He left behind laughter, inspiration, and a standard of excellence that remains the gold standard in the entertainment world. His life shows that true influence is not defined by headlines or constant attention, but by the lasting impact left on a craft, on colleagues, and on the hearts of those who watch. And even as his achievements are remembered, one question lingers. Did Johnny finally find the peace he seemed to search for after leaving the public eye? And could there one day be secrets from his mansion waiting to shock the world? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. If you enjoyed this video, click on the next video on your screen.